a pleasant good evening, friends, and welcome to another edition of Huntsville Sports Weekly. I'm Rob Hipp with KSAM 1017, joined as always by my good friend and colleague, Mr. Josh Criswell of the Huntsville Item. Josh, we've got another great show, and today a little bit different because we are live. I know the audio may sound a little bit, like we're in a tin can. We're still working on a few things, but I'm excited to be here today, Josh, and excited who we're going to talk to. We got some great guests today. Run us through that.
Yeah, a couple of really great guests coming up. Going to be joined really shortly by Huntsville Athletics Director and head football coach Rodney Southern, and also former Huntsville Hornets star and Sam Houston State standout Brian Adams, who's your partner on the radio dial as the color analyst for both the Hornets and the Bearcats. Really excited to talk to both of them. Coach Southern about a special past few seasons, a historic run, something we haven't seen in decades here in Huntsville, and also some exciting things looking forward. And then with Brian, just Bearcat memories, exciting Huntsville season, and just kind of maybe a little bit about the uncertainty surrounding everything in high school, college, all sports right now.
It's going to be a lot of fun. We're bringing you the show every Thursday around 6:15, 6:30 or so make sure to set your calendars, your time. You can like the KSAM Facebook page, and also make sure to like the Huntsville Item Facebook page as well to stay up to date with the latest. Josh does an incredible job keeping up with what's going on here in Huntsville, and we're right there with you, Josh. Now, before we dig in and bring Coach on here in just a few minutes, you guys at the Item have been working on something that's coming out. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so right here, this is going to be coming out with Saturday's paper. This is our Huntsville Living Fall Magazine, Walker County Proud issue. Highlights some of the individuals that really truly make Walker County great. Obviously, a big sports audience tuning in for this show, so a couple ones I want to hit on. In addition to our Citizen of the Year and other features around the community, we're going to have a couple of Sam Houston State ones. Going to have an exclusive Q&A with new president Elisa White, and then also a feature on Sam Houston State women's basketball coach Raven Justice, who led the third biggest turnaround in the country last season, or her first season, set a school record last season for Southland wins, and just keeps taking that Bearcat women's hoops program on the rise. So make sure to grab a copy of Saturday's paper or swing by the office next week, and we're happy to help you out.
Awesome. Well, Josh, we're going to step aside. We're going to take a brief momentary break. When we come back, we'll hear from Huntsville Athletic Director, Huntsville ISD Athletic Director, and head football coach of the Hornets, Coach Rodney Southern. Stay with us, friends. Huntsville Sports Weekly continues right here in just a few moments.
Welcome back to Huntsville Sports Weekly. I'm Huntsville Item Sports Editor Josh Criswell, joined by my co-host, KSAM Sports Director Rob Hipp, and sitting right here in the middle of us, Huntsville Athletics Director and head football coach Rodney Southern. Coach, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to chat with us tonight.
No problem.
So Coach, obviously a lot of uncertainty and whatnot going on, and have an exciting team for this year on the gridiron, but one thing I wanted to talk to you a little bit. These past two seasons in particular, I think 5 playoff wins, a historic level of success that we haven't seen here in decades. This group, you lose 30 seniors from last year. Well, just take us through, what are some of the things you'll remember the most about that group, and just also, some of your favorite memories. I know you had the opportunity to obviously coach your son Matthew over these past 2 seasons. What are the things that you'll remember the most about these past few seasons here?
Well, it's kind of hard to put, when you try to narrow it down to 2 or 3 things, obviously. Probably the biggest thing was the first playoff win, in my tenure here against
was it Nacogdoches?
Against Nacogdoches at Sam.
At Bowers.
And that one technically was probably over at halftime, but just the excitement that you could feel it coming with that team, but at the same time, there was still that uncertainty of how good that team really was, and then of course, from there, taking that group of kids to NRG, and anytime a high school kid gets to play in a venue like that, that's always exciting for kids. But and when you Manville was kind of the discussion, okay, well, this is the end for Huntsville, this is it, and, and our good thing, our kids didn't listen to all that stuff, and, probably as far as a football game in the 6 years now going into 7 that I've been here, that's probably one of the cleanest football games we've played since we've been on this run. But obviously went in there, and of course, and when anytime you look at a year or a second year, if you look at that, then going, of course, and playing Marshall High School, which I've got hopefully a pretty good history with that school, but just the excitement of that game, and our kids now, and I told a couple of them the other day, they came and worked out with us, and I told them, you're going to look back 10, 15 years from now and say, I played at NRG, I played at the Star in Frisco. And then, of course, looking back, for me personally, kind of on a selfish note, the success that my son was able to have and to be a part of that. And the biggest thing for me was not getting to a point of trying to separate being his dad and being the head coach, and those two things. And then, of course, this past year going to Marshall, where I hope I have a pretty good history there, but to win that game the way, because nobody thought we were going to win that game, and to go in and play the way we played. Now the sad part of it is losing 2 really close ones to a Fort Bend Marshall team that played for a state championship, and knowing that, okay, if we'd have got by them, what would have happened? And that's always the hard part, but that's, 99% of us end that way where you have a what if. But, the memories of those kids and what they have done for this program, I sometimes get a lot of the credit for stuff like that, but, we had a tremendous group of kids, and we've got a tremendous group coming, but those things are probably the things that stick out the most from the last 2 years anyway. And obviously 5 playoff wins, that's been the most in a long time, and the excitement level, and to see, the old saying, to see them roll the streets up, roll the sidewalks up, and leave and go out of town, that was huge. Especially, I've got a picture in my office of the crowd at the Star in Frisco, and the good thing is I zoom in on it, and my daughter and my wife are in that picture, and of course my son's out there. So, those are memories that obviously as a dad and as a head football coach that I'll never forget.
Absolutely.
Well, Coach, you talked a little bit, kind of segging into what you were just talking about with these kids. 30 seniors departing, you lose 30 seniors now heading into this year. Tell us a little bit about the focus, and of course we're dealing with COVID, but kind of the focus, and how does that change the landscape here now as we try to get ready for this next season?
Well, the biggest thing for us is you've got to kind of transition, and people look back and go, oh, you're losing a Matthew Southern, you're losing a Jordan Brown, but people said 2 years ago you're losing a Trevonde Sweat, you're losing a Jalen Griffin, so we're always going to be losing somebody. I think our program is now at a point where, like our deal for this year is going to be the standard. We've got a standard now that these kids have to uphold. And I actually met with 15 of our guys that we are narrowing down our captains. At some point we will narrow it down to probably 4 or 5, but those 15 guys meet with me once a week during our strength and conditioning. And just listening to them talk, they're a different type of team, different type of kids. A lot of them are very quiet, but I think there are some really talented football players. The only thing they don't have is experience. And it's old. I told them today, I said, some of y'all gonna get your nose bloodied the first week, and until you get your nose bloodied, you really don't know what's gonna happen. But I think our program is in such a good place right now, COVID or no COVID. I think our kids understand. They're doing what we've asked them to do, strength and conditioning wise. We're going to go right up to the first day of school. So hopefully all of those factors play into it. Now our schedule is going to be tougher, especially non-district. We've got 3 6A teams that numbers wise are going to be significantly bigger than us. But we lost a Houston Worthing game that we had. We picked up Nederland, which has been a perennial, really good football program for years. So we're going to get tested the first 4 weeks, but that's what your non-district schedule is for to begin with.
I mean, talk about some new pieces that are going to be stepping in for you guys, and obviously one of those we saw a couple flashes of last year. Junior quarterback now, AJ Wilson, started those last 2 games to help get y'all into the playoffs. You know, AJ's a guy who, just as someone that's been covering multiple sports, just seems like a very special athlete. I think was 6th man of the year in the district in basketball. Then obviously we saw a little bit of what he can do on the football field. You know, me and you had a conversation. I think you said AJ reminds you of a guy you had, you know, earlier in your career. You know, what is it about AJ that gives, you know, him the potential to lead a potentially special offense?
Well, I think that, you know, if you narrowed it down to one thing, he's a super athlete. You know, I even told when those captains were in there, of course AJ's in the room with them, and I even told them, I said, now AJ's a different type of quarterback than Matthew. I said, if I put them both out there in a race, AJ's going to outrun him. I said, I didn't bless Matthew with a whole lot of those kind of genes, but the biggest thing for him, I think AJ understands the situation he's in. He understands that the program where it is today, that he's got to be above and beyond. But the 3 probably most important things, he's got a great attitude. He takes coaching extremely well, which you want in your quarterback. Second thing, he's got a very, very strong arm, which in what we do with the skill guys we're going to have, that'll be a weapon. And the third thing is if you try to line up and blitz and really come after him, you better get him down, because if he gets in the open field, the one thing we didn't get to see him do this past spring is run the quarter mile. He's probably as good a quarter miler as he is a basketball player and football player. So having an athlete like that who understands what we're doing, and the thing I like about AJ, the kids love him. The kids, they kind of naturally gravitate to him, and in your quarterback, you obviously want a guy like that.
Right, and then, you know, over on the other side of the ball, it seems like one of the position groups where, you know, you lose some pieces but still have some key pieces coming back. You know, Cody McLaren at linebacker, and then up front you have a couple of really guys that made big contributions. You know, Quaterian Riles, the Babino brothers, I think Sebastian Patterson coming back as well, if I'm not mistaken. How big is that D-line group going to be for you this year?
Well, I think you look at what we've done the last 3 years defensively. The key has been if you can take 4 guys and rush the passer with all the stuff people are doing with run-pass options and, you know, all the dynamic things people want to get their quarterback to do. I think when you can stop a lot of that with 4 or 5, but specifically 4 down linemen, and I think, you know, now if we get to go all the way up to practice and start on the 7th, I think we got the 4 best D linemen in the district. Now, A&M Consolidated may argue with that, but I'm a little bit more biased because I get to see them every day, you know, and I saw all 4 of them today, and you know, I would take those 4 at any point. But I think they're in the same situation that AJ's in. They know that that's been kind of a strong point for us the last 3 years, and obviously 2 or 3 of those guys are playing at the next level right now. So that's a group that I feel really good about. Number one, because they're a lot like AJ. They love to play football. They're there every day. I mean, that's all you can ask at this point. And they're really good football players on top of it.
Well, Coach, you know this whole landscape, and we're still trying to sift through that, and we'll just see what happens. But all gears are go if we're going to play, of course, and those pieces starting to come together. And it kind of brings me to a new point. I'm very blessed to be here this year and looking forward, Coach, to calling the games. I consider it just a true privilege to be able to do that along with Brian Adams. But Coach, you know, the video aspect this year, something I wanted to ask you about, especially as athletic director. You know, in the years past, of course, UIL says no live video on Friday night, and football is the only sport that restriction is there. The executive committee has lifted that restriction to make it more accessible now for the fans. From your perspective as a coach and also the athletic director, you know, talking about bringing exposure to kids, because that's what we want to do on this show, is really highlight the student athletes and help get these kids in your program some exposure. How much does that mean to your program, being able to have video, and what does that do for these kids and folks that may be out there that can't attend the games?
Well, if you look today, as of the last 30 minutes, I guess, we're looking at a 50% capacity unless UIL changes something. So half of whatever stadium we're in, whether it's at home or on the road, you know, and we have some parents and probably some grandparents that love to see their kids or grandkids play, but they're not going to put themselves in danger in this situation right now. So I think knowing that there are people like that, I talked to a mom the other day, and the granddad lives at home and he's got leukemia. Well, he's not going to be able to go out. So for him to be able to see the game live and see his grandson play football would be a huge thing. But I think from a recruiting standpoint, you know, a lot of people go to recruiting first on that. Well, we have enough video and can get enough video out recruiting wise. So to me, it's not necessarily a concern there, but I think it's an opportunity for teams to be able to showcase specific guys, and obviously your team and your program in general, but being able to get our product live where a person who may not have ever seen us just comes across and says, hey, I want to go see Ed Bobino or AJ Wilson play football. I think that's the unknown of that, or the thing that's going to be a positive for kids and a positive for us as coaches. And I don't know that the UIL will keep it around after all this is gone, but I do think it's a positive for kids and for anybody that is either concerned or just doesn't want to, or, you know, when I was in Belton, if we would have had the opportunity to do this, we had a lot of parents that were overseas. I mean, the fact that they could get up at whatever time overseas and see it would be a great thing. So it's not just us in Huntsville, but just the state of Texas in general I think it's going to be a huge thing.
And Coach, something that we talked about too when you and I previously met a few weeks ago, just to let the community know from here at KSAM, and what I'm trying to do as sports director and bring now to the Huntsville community is, look, there's more. We don't want to forget about the other kids. We got football, we're excited about that, but we have, of course, girls sports, we've got other sports, we've got baseball, basketball, softball. So from here at KSAM, we're trying to work on a few things to be able to deliver all those sports. Now, maybe not all of them can be on the radio, but that's something that we really want to do, Coach, and we appreciate the opportunity to work with you to make that happen. We don't want to leave any kids out. We want to try to cover as much as we can.
Well, I think that's the thing that I think is a perfect example is with the basketball program. The boys basketball program won, I think, 40 district games in a row, and that Texas high school coaches poll doesn't rank them one single time after going undefeated in district play for X amount of years. I mean, how big is that for some of your programs that don't necessarily get the publicity that they deserve, even though they've had that success?
Well, I think number one, it will show, hopefully it will show the type of kid we have. And that's not necessarily a win or a loss, but I think it's just the fact that we have quietly, some of it by design, have quietly built a lot of these programs to the point of people are not necessarily wanting to play us anymore, whether it's they're not sure or whether it's, you know, okay, well, you've had success over here or over here. Our goal is to get to a point, obviously, where the success level is across the board, and we have to do it, and this is the thing where I think all of this culminates for us. We have to do it with athletes that are shared. You know, it's like AJ. AJ will probably be hopefully a starter on our basketball team. He'll be the anchor leg on our mile relay team. There'll be a lot of things like that where a guy like AJ Wilson or some of our girls in volleyball that also play basketball. I mean, it's just, number one, it's going to help them get exposure that, whether it's recruiting or not, you know, sometimes, and they're kids, they, as much as they handle a phone, you know, sometimes they just like to see themselves.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're all guilty of that. I know I am at times. I just don't know how to do it quite as well as they do. But, you know, just the idea of the exposure outside of Walker County and showing people that, you know, number one, you better be careful if you do play us in some sports, because we're going to do everything we can to beat you.
Right. And how, you know, just, you know, one last thing I wanted to close on. We've talked a little bit about how this virus has kind of, you know, made video a very important aspect of everything we're going to do in these next few months. And, you know, one thing I just wanted to ask you is, you know, throughout all this uncertainty we've had, you know, really since mid-March, what's the thing that's impressed you the most just about the way that your players and your coaches and administrators there over at Huntsville ISD have handled everything?
Well, I think you look back, and the key word in all this is unknown. That there's guidance, but sometimes there's not guidance. There's recommendations, but you should do, or we suggest you do. You know, I think Dr. Shepard from the start of all this stepped out in the forefront and led, which is, what you want. UIL's in a tough spot because of all the different things that they have to try to juggle to make it work for everybody. Just like the NCAA is in the same situation with football. But I think what we have, number one, we've got a superintendent who understands how important athletics is. Everybody may not like it when you say it, but we've got some kids that come to school because of the social aspect and sports. But if we can get them to graduate from high school and get them into a 4-year or a 2-year university, and they have an opportunity to succeed down the road because they were a good football player or whatever they were, I think that part overshadows all the other. Now, I think our coaching staff and our kids and Dr. Shepard and his administrative team understand that strength and conditioning and the stuff that's going on right now, kids need that social aspect. Now, yeah, we've got to be safe. I tell people our field house has never been as clean as it is right now. But I think our kids understand that too, because if we mess this up, it hurts a group of juniors and a group of seniors. And you can't get that back. These group of seniors they're going to be in a situation where if this thing gets messed up, you got guys who have a potential of not getting recruited. You have a lot of things that are on the line, and we talk about that. I talked about that today when we talked about why are you here? Because if you're here every day, you got a reason to be here. Now, if that reason is deterred by all of what's going on, then you've got to figure that out, and you've got to do what you need to do. But I think our staff has handled it. I think the district, just watching as this was going through the process in the spring, how many kids we fed, because I could see a lot of them coming into the high school, all that stuff. This community ought to look back and go, man, this district did some things to, number one, to help people, but at the same time, we've also got to move. We got to move forward. And yeah, there's going to be some danger or there's going to be some risk, but at some point we've got to get some semblance of normal, whatever normal is going to look like now. But it's just like playing a football game. If there's 50% capacity or if there's no fans, we've still got to be able to try to figure that out and make it the best for the group of kids, because they need the social. That's the first thing I noticed when we got back to strength and conditioning. It's hard to keep them 6 feet apart because they hadn't seen each other. Now, they've been Instagramming and Snapchatting all over the place, but they haven't seen each other. And just to be able to go in the weight room and watch them work and sweat, and and of course half of them got a mask on and you don't really know who it is, but all of that to me is vital for a kid, especially a 17, 18-year-old kid that's getting ready to take hopefully the next step in his life.
Well, Coach, that's all I got for you. Rob, you got anything else?
No, Coach, again, just appreciate your time and looking forward to doing this more. And, we have Huntsville Sports Weekly, but as we figure out what's going to happen this season, we're hoping to have a coaches show that's specifically for Huntsville High School and the Hornets as well. So we'll keep you up to date. But, Coach, as always, appreciate you and appreciate all that you do in the community, and looking forward to calling the games this season. And more so, looking forward to seeing those kids back out on the field.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and this is a good thing. We need to keep moving forward.
We'll step aside and take a break. When we come back, we'll talk to Brian Adams. Stay with us. It's Huntsville Sports Weekly right here on KSAM, also from the Huntsville Item. We'll be right back. All right, friends, welcome back to Huntsville Sports Weekly. I'm Rob Hipp, joined alongside my good friend Josh Criswell, the Huntsville Item. Of course, I'm here at KSAM as a sports director. Brian Adams joining us as well. Brian, we'll get to you in just a minute, brother. I know you're here, but we do have some breaking news that Josh wanted to go over, some news that just came through on the Twitter feed. Josh?
Yeah, just while we were talking to Coach Southern just a few minutes ago, some news kind of started to trickle down that the Big Sky is they're going to be canceling football for this fall. And the big news that came out this week, I guess, to kind of give a little bit of a backstory, is the NCAA kind of kicked the can down the road a couple of days on a decision on whether or not to hold fall championships, which includes the FCS playoffs that Sam Houston State takes part in, on the football field. One of the requirements is that 50% of eligible playoff teams need to still be playing the season. And, obviously the CAA was the big one earlier, the first big domino to drop. And then while we were on the air, the Big Sky sounds like it has canceled its season. I think the Pioneer League is going to follow suit. And unfortunately, I think that looks like it'll bring that number below that 50% threshold that we need to have a FCS fall championship in football. So a little bit of a disheartening note as we bring things back, but I don't think any of us could say that this was necessarily unexpected at this point.
Yeah, with the way everything's been, safety, of course, has got to be the number one concern. And, it's just tough because, Brian, you and I had a great season last year. I was blessed to come on and call for the Bearcats and very grateful for that opportunity and privilege, and now being here in Huntsville. I talked to you about this, and you were telling me, like, Rob, you've got to get here to Huntsville, and you've got to get plugged in. And now blessed with that opportunity to be here in Huntsville, I think it's so important to be involved in the community, be a part of the community, not just me, but whoever's involved with what we're doing. And Brian, you talk about someone being involved, and doesn't get more involved than you, the former Sam Houston State University Bearcat. Brian, just talk a little bit about last season. Not really, you and I, but just your thoughts on the season overall last year, because we had a lot of fun in that broadcast booth, man.
No, we did, and I appreciate y'all having me in on your show. Last season was a terrific season, really, for the Huntsville Hornets and for Sam Houston, and I enjoyed calling the games in our first year in the booth together. Sam Houston, I think, had some injuries that kind of prohibited them from really their full potential. They had some quarterback issues. Ty Brock was playing hurt. Eric Schmidt was hurt, broke his hand. But the good thing about that, and Coach Casey Keeler and his coaches did a great job, is in the game of football, you have to overcome adversity. And they did a great job of doing that. So that was exciting to see. It ended up being a great year. They were over 500 again for, the whatever year in a row they've been that. Conversely, the Huntsville Hornets again went deep into the playoffs, and just an amazing run. Coach Southern has done just a great job with the Hornet program since he's been here, and it's been exciting to be in the booth and still be a part of a game that I really love, and it's fun to watch.
Right, and for you, Brian, we talked about it a little bit off the air. You're a guy that's been around this Huntsville community for what seems like decades, and played here in the 80s for Huntsville and for Sam. You've noticed something over these past, I guess, 5 or 6 years since Rodney Southern arrived as the head football coach and athletics director here at Huntsville, and it's kind of something that whether I talk to different people, whether it's down from the Houston area and the media members that kind of talk about how Huntsville always had these kids, but now they're finally putting it together. For you, what's it been like to watch Coach Southern really capitalize on that talent, but also just watch this community sort of rally around this team, and not just football, but all sports?
Oh, it's been exciting. I have been watching football since my older brother Mark was playing in the late 70s here in Huntsville, and then he continued to play for Sam Houston. So I've watched the Hornet program throughout these years, and traditionally, Huntsville Hornets have always had a very strong team, great coaching. Everything kind of has, I don't want to say an ebb and flow, but when Coach Rodney Southern came in, the Hornet program had been kind of down for the last few years. He came in, and with his experience and his coaching and attitude and everything that goes along with it, he's really turned the program just around, done a 180. They have done a complete turnaround, and it is so much fun to see these kids because, as you just said, Josh, Huntsville traditionally has had a ton of talent, and they come out, and when you see those kids come out playing together, is a team and accomplishing the things they accomplish, I mean, there's nothing better.
Do you have, I kind of asked head coach Rodney Southern the same question. This past 2 years, I think you said we've seen something we haven't seen in 4 decades as far as that level of postseason success. Do you have a favorite memory in the booth for the Hornets during that 2-year stretch we've had?
Of course. I mean, there's so many good memories, and to pick one would be really difficult. But just to see the run that they did and the enthusiasm, and it brought this town together in support of the team was phenomenal. And it's something that Huntsville, the Huntsville community loves their sports, and especially football. And like I was saying earlier, the Hornets have traditionally been a powerhouse, always have been for years. I mean, we set a record back when I was playing, even before I was playing, 10 years undefeated at home. There is not hardly any programs around in the country that can say
It's
that.
unheard of.
And on top of that, for those 10 years, undefeated in district, whether you were home or away. So the winning attitude has been, in this program forever. And to see Coach Southern come back and go as far into the playoffs and as deep as he did, and to support the community, it was wonderful. It was a flashback of back when I was a player. It was great.
We're talking to Brian Adams here. I'm Rob Hipp along with Josh Criswell here on Huntsville Sports Weekly. And Brian, like I was going back to last year, we had a lot of fun in the booth. You and I literally met on the tarmac, and before I know it, I felt like I've known you for years, and we've developed a really good friendship. We've talked a lot, of course, after football season was over. We keep in touch, and now, of course, here in Huntsville, being able to chat with you more, Brian. But I wanted to ask you, let's go back briefly and just talk a little bit more about Sam Houston State University last year. What was maybe the biggest surprise for you last year? Whether it's something positive or maybe even something negative. What was maybe one of the biggest surprises for you last year?
One of the biggest surprises for me, Rob, was the youngsters that stepped up and filled the void and played like they were veteran football players. There was a lot of injuries that took place last year on Sam Houston, and those younger guys that didn't have near the experience as the older guys stepped up, did what they did, and did a great job of it, and kept Sam Houston having a winning record. And for that, I thought was one of the highlights. Also, and I've got to tip my hat to Ty Brock.
100%. That McNeese game was
It was
unreal.
It was unreal.
Playing on one
It was
leg.
unreal. This guy, he could barely walk.
Yeah.
And you're talking about playing Division I football at a very high level, and you've got guys that their sole focus is to just tear your head off.
Yeah.
And you got Ty Brock able to play and play successfully, basically one leg.
Yeah.
It was
And it was an
amazing to
ugly
watch.
first half, and he came out of the gates in the third quarter, and it wasn't all him for sure, but
That's right.
it was a special moment. And I think, one of the things that stood out to me, probably one of the things the most stood out about Ty Brock was his post-game interview that game, just giving all the credit to the teammates and the O-line and his receivers. But also, Casey Keeler, I think he kind of has a general rule of thumb a lot of schools do, where once a player transfers out, they don't really comment on them or anything. But, I had head coach Keeler on the podcast a couple of weeks, or I guess months back, and he had several minutes just glowing praise for Ty Brock, a guy who is now going to be playing up at Central Michigan whenever we start playing football again.
Well, that was amazing to watch. And, Javon Leon.
Oh yeah.
We always did that.
We can't-
Every time Javon Leon would come up, there would be a commercial because Brian always go, Javon Leon. That was our little thing,
Well,
And he's so exciting. You talk about those young guys. I mean, the
That was
guy is a
awesome.
freshman. I mean, and it's funny because we talked about it before the season, and I remember Keeler told me, he's like, he's really talented, but we've got a lot of guys, and we'd kind of like to redshirt him, and it's like we just couldn't keep him off the field.
I know, and when you got a guy that's that talented and that young who can stand out and play immediately
On that defensive line.
on that defensive line, that's something special. And he is young, and he's only going to get bigger. He's only going to get stronger and faster, and man, he is going to be a handful.
And now gets to play alongside Bryson Hayes here for the next couple years.
Former Hornet.
Huntsville star, now taking it on, and maybe we can see more of that trend moving forward. I think it's only a good thing the more Huntsville Hornets you have in that program.
Oh, I agree. And like I said,
Especially with the way the program's growing. I mean,
there's no doubt about it. And Huntsville, again, they've got so many good athletes, and to see some of them be able to stay at home and play at a high level at the next level in college is awesome, man. You can't beat that. So
And Brian, it's not just on the field what these guys do. You know, I've talked a lot about several players, and I don't ever want to single any player out, but I've talked about Matt McRobert before, who's in my opinion one of the best punters and one of the best punters in college football. You know, and he had an incredible season last year with what he was able to do. But just like so many other Sam Houston players, it's what they do off the field. We were at a game, and I think it was in North Dakota, when one of that first road game was that the first. The first game was New Mexico.
New Mexico was first, then it was.
Then we went on.
Panhandle.
Then went up to
North Dakota.
And we were at North Dakota, and I'll never forget walking into a convenience store there, and a lady had told me, she goes, because I had my Sam Houston shirt, and she goes, you're with the team. She thought I was a coach. I mean, I had my shirt tucked in, I was wearing khaki slacks and dress shoes, and I said, no, I do the broadcast. Well, she goes, you go back and let those coaches know that several players came in here, and those were some of the most respectful young men that I've ever met. And I think that's so important to share that with what's going on off the field, not just what's on the field. And I talked about Matt McRobert. Here's a young man that's finally officially completed his master's science degree in sports management, and as well to be the Southland Conference All-Academic Team for 2019. What an honor for him, and we've seen that replicated throughout many players across this Sam Houston team, Brian. It's cool to see that.
Oh, it is cool. And Matt is just such a nice guy. Very genuine, down to earth, and a lot of those guys are. And it's funny, when we go out of town with those teams and we're eating dinner, you know, with the players and everything like that, they'll come up and they'll talk to you, and you ask about their family, they ask about how you're doing. And again, you got to attribute a lot of that to the coaching staff at Sam Houston, teaching these young men, you know, respect and how to behave and act on the road. And those guys are there. It's fun. It is a lot of fun.
It's something, Brian, for me this year. You know, last year was kind of my first year getting involved and understanding the dynamics of Division I and how that works and some of those kind of things. But I'm going to tell you this, man, that this year I really want to focus a lot more, too, on the backstories of some of these players. I want to tell the history of maybe how they got, like Matt McRobert coming from Australia. How did that journey happen? I think that's really critical to share those stories and to give people the insight about these players, about the staff.
Oh, yeah.
And just make it more of a story along, of course, with the sports calls we do. And it's going to be a lot of fun. And I just can't wait. We just don't know what's going to happen.
I know, and that's kind of the unfortunate thing with this COVID. It's, you know, obviously it's changed everything, you know, the way people do business, the way these football games may be played, the way things are conducted at home. And so that's unfortunate, but you're right. You know, story, you got a kid who is All-American, preseason All-American punter for Sam Houston from Australia, and you end up in Huntsville, Texas, playing for Sam Houston State.
With another one of his Australian mates just down the road playing at Incarnate Word as well.
And, you know, that's amazing. And, you know, these kids that come in from Sam Houston, they come in from all over the country.
Yeah.
All over the world.
Yeah.
And that is, again, that is a big feather in the hat for Sam Houston that can draw that kind of talent, you know, from overseas.
Well, see, the good news about not having an air conditioning, because my car doesn't have AC right now, it's broke. The good news about that is you're more aware of your surroundings because you have to drive with your windows down. So I have my windows down. I just turned off 45, heading back on Sam Houston Avenue, and I hear this very distinct accent, and it was Matt saying hello to me. And if my AC would have been working, I would have never heard him. So that's my message today. If you don't have an AC that works, it's okay. You'll be more alert with what's going on.
Exactly.
Well, hey, I got one more for you, Brian.
Sure.
You know, you talk about the talent that's been coming into Sam Houston State over the years, and you know, obviously there's been success. You know, there were the Josh McCown years in the early 2000s and some really great postseason runs, but even with the last 2 years battling some adversity and missing the postseason, this past decade, Sam Houston State, second winningest program in the FCS, you know, as an alum and as a guy that, you know, calls the games, what's it been like to watch the program grow since Willie Fritz took it over around 2010 and with Casey Keeler carrying the torch since then?
You know, it's been an amazing journey to watch, really, Josh. I remember as a kid watching my older brother when it was, I believe it was the Lone Star Conference.
Mm-hmm.
And
Division II back in the day.
Division II back in the day. And they played football at Pritchett Field, or Bedrock.
That's right.
You know,
one of the oldest stadiums in college football.
There's an amazing history there, right? So Huntsville would play on Friday nights, and then Sam Houston would play on Saturdays. And when Sam Houston would play on Saturday, the Hornets had already torn up the field.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and that went on for decades, you know. But what is so much fun is that you see the program progress, and you go from the Lone Star Conference to the Southland Conference, and then you get to, the championship ball game.
Yeah.
I mean,
What's that moment like for you whenever you're sitting there and you've been around the program for decades and y'all are up there in Frisco getting ready to play for a national championship?
Well, I wasn't there as a player and I wasn't there on the radio. It was before I got there, but I know I had some friends that did play. And they said it was an experience like you just can't imagine. And you can't, because when you play in college, any college sport for that matter, the best of the best are playing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And then to get to the big dance, only a select few teams can do that. The great teams, And so to watch those guys experience that and almost pull off a national championship, it's indescribable.
Brian, kind of one last question for me, and then if Josh has one, of course, but you have a unique perspective because you played at the high school level, of course, but you've also played here at Sam Houston State, so you understand both those levels. We talk about this pandemic and what's going through these young players' minds. I know that you're not experiencing it from a player perspective right now, of course, but what do you think is going through these young people, and how do you think that they're able to handle that? How would you have handled that if it was happening during your time?
Well, that's a great question. This is something that's never happened, so it's a new experience for everybody. The one thing that I would say it's going through these athletes' minds is it doesn't bother them. This is something that they're going to play through, and they're trained and ready to play. And I don't think they're giving it a second thought of what COVID is going to do for them. I really truly believe that these guys are ready to go, and whatever the circumstances are, they're going to go play and compete and win.
Well, you give that unique perspective, and so I think that's just what it comes down to. You're still going to get out there, you're going to play, you're going to hustle and practice. We'll see how everything goes, Brian. But man, I'm looking forward to not only getting back in the booth with you, of course, with Sam Houston State. Again, we don't know how that's going to work, what we're going to see. But also this year, very excited too to call for Huntsville Hornets whenever we don't have a game that we've got to get ready for the next day. So it may, who knows, Josh? Who knows? It may just be high school, right? We still don't know.
No, so many unknowns, especially at the college level. Just the whole travel logistics of everything. Not to mention the financials from the testing requirements. I think that's been a big thing that's really kind of hurt a lot of these FCS programs, because I think the thing people forget is that Sam Houston State's a little bit fortunate in the sense that they don't have to play like a big money FBS Power 5 game every single year to kind of keep things going, smoothly on the financial side. But, across the board, it's a lot of these schools in the Southland do rely on those games. I mean, Nichols about to get $500,000 from LSU, so a little bit of uncertainty financially, I think, really just kind of might make that college football season not happen, but it means more focus on the high school scene, assuming everything can keep on moving forward.
One thing that's crazy is everything is breaking as we speak.
Yeah, literally during the interview it happened.
It is happening as we're doing this show.
Yeah.
Breaking news is taking place, and things are changing daily. So, what's going to happen, we're not 100% sure. But no matter what, it'll be a wild ride.
And there's words that you keep hearing in the media, and I haven't said them because I hear them every day. But it's words about what's going on right now, and we don't want to be cliche, so we're not going to say them. But that's something you can kind of think about, Brian. But hey, man, really cool. I wanted to get to this before we go, Josh, and then some final thoughts from Josh too after I show this. But Brian, I had a really awesome opportunity, just very humbled by this, to talk to the late Bobby Grisham, the great Bobby Grisham. Who is in his 80s now, but he played on the championship team in the 50s. He also played at Sam Houston State University. He played on the team, in fact, that was the only undefeated team, went 10-0, and they played in the Refrigerator Bowl. They were up in Alaska for that game.
I remember, I've got a friend of mine's father.
You were at that one?
Oh, no.
You were playing at that
I was there, yeah. I was there with the Eskimos and Polar Bears and everybody else. But no, a friend of mine's father, one of my really good friends' father was on that same team. Yeah, Charles Campbell.
Well, we're going to have to talk more about this, but I'm showing right here for our friends that are on the Facebook live stream. There is Bobby Grisham there. I had an opportunity to get to know some more of his family. Sydney Grisham, and Bobby, of course, his son Tom here in Huntsville as well. I just wanted to give a little bit of a teaser because we're going to talk more. I actually had about an hour that I got to spend with this gentleman and his family, and it was an incredible hour learning more history about this wonderful community, about Bobby and all the wonderful things that he did. And I'm going to tell you one takeaway is that Mr. Grisham is so in love with his family, more than football. And he loves talking football, But the biggest thing that I took away from that is how much that he enjoys his family and loves being with his family. And the good news is, coming up here in the next future episodes, I'm going to break down a lot of that audio, Brian, and we're going to hear in his own words, in Bobby's own words, what it was like to play for the Huntsville Hornets, what it was like to be part of Sam Houston State University, and then also what it was like for him when he was a junior high coach to coach against Bum Phillips. So it's going to be
Wow.
really cool getting to hear those stories, and we'll have them here on Huntsville Sports Weekly. That's what it's all about. Josh?
Absolutely. You know, I think that's all I got for you guys today. You know, Brian, thank you so much for joining us. And, you know, I guess the last parting message I have for you guys is we're going to keep bringing this to you every week. We talk about there's uncertainty in the sports world all around, but we're hoping that this can be maybe something, a little bit of an escape from all the negative things going on in the sports world. We'll talk about what's happening, talk to some figures in the community, talk to some players, coaches, whoever, and you know, just kind of give you that sports fix as we kind of keep wandering into this unknown.
Yeah, and I kind of want to give a call to action to anybody out there that's watching. You may be watching it live right now. You may be watching this an hour from now or even a week from now. But if you see this and you hear this, if you'd like to be a part of the show, if you'd like to share some history, maybe you've played for the Huntsville Hornets or even Sam Houston State University. Maybe you were a coach or you went there. If you have a history story, something to share, we'd love to have you on this show sometime. Feel free to email me. You can email Rob, R-O-B, at KSAM1017.com. That's R-O-B at KSAM1017.com. And let us know your story. We'd love to have you here on it. As I end every broadcast, I'm just reminding you today that we're not strong enough alone to make it on our own, friends. We need each other. Provide a word of encouragement. Lend a hand of support. Somebody out there today needs you. Until next time, God bless. We'll see you next Thursday. And hey, happy weekend coming up, guys.
Happy weekend, guys.
Thanks for joining us.
We'll be back next week.